Right, I was going to say good afternoon, good morning. We're going to change it up a bit. We're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to create those in-store experiences. So this is the cool creative piece part of what we're going to talk about this morning. And I'm going to do a little bit of a chat on stage. I'm going to talk to you about some of the examples I've seen from around the world from my own clients. And then we're going to have Vanessa and we're going to have Darren up, and we're going to have a sparkling conversation after that. Now let me tell you about myself. My name is Colin Lewis. I work for Retail Media Works. If you ask me my trade, I'm a career marketer by trade. And over the last 4 or 5 years, I've been working with retailers around the world to help start and scale their retail media networks, and also work on the brand side as well, who also want to understand that. And for my sins, I've written about 250,000 words on retail media, having written 8 best practice reports, and created 2 courses as well. And I'm a columnist for Marketing Week magazine here in this country. Now, in-store experiences. You probably heard this earlier on, which was this idea of what's old is new again, and in-store media has been around for a while. And in fact, what I want to say, and I actually want to pick on Dean from Co-op, because Dean from Co-op said, sure, haven't Co-op been doing this for 10 years so far? And I want to say to Dean, 10 years in in-store media is completely rookie numbers, absolute rookie numbers. And let me explain why. Imagine it's, say, 2,000 years ago. Now, Dean isn't that old, but imagine it's 2,000 years ago. And Dean is finished today and he wants to go for a drink. And he wants actually a glass of wine. What would he do? Well, if he was living in Pompeii in AD 79, he would go for a glass of wine. And this is actually from Herculaneum near Pompeii, obviously. And it's a wine shop sign inside a tavern where Quintus Dinas would be going in to have his glass of wine. And this actually says ad curcume, which is Latin for by the pitcher. Actually, I did Latin in school, so I'm one of these complete nerds who loves reading about Latin. And their 4 pitchers are in completely different colors, each one with a different price point and a different volume. And that's probably the earliest in-store media that you can find. So Quintus Dinas would go and have his glass of wine and finish his day. And that's why I say, when everybody says to me, oh, retail media, in-store media has been around for a long time, I say, yeah, 2,000 years. But on a more serious note, Walmart actually set up a smart network screen and started working on this in 1993. Andy, who was the CMO of Walmart at the time, and later Asda in the UK, spent a lot of time talking about this ad network in this similar event in New York in January. And they had all the screens, they had everything in place. And then eventually they shut it down in 2020, despite having everything put in place. And we'll see why in a second. But let me start with where we are with retailing in 2024. Now, some of this material has been covered this morning, so we'll whiz through it. But retailers are struggling under the weight of rising costs, margins. I actually went around and searched all the margins for some major grocers around the world, and you can see very few of them are over 3.5%. Showrooming, which is where people walk in with their phone, check the price, and then go buy it online, having left the store. Of course, we're all familiar with Amazon e-com growth, and everybody here in this room will know about the growth of Amazon advertising, typically 20–25% a year on year. Retailing and those margins are not going up by more than 1 to 2% a year, whereas in bricks and mortar, whereas e-commerce is growing by sometimes 7, 8, 9% in all major markets. So as a result, retailers are building out retail media propositions. And as we've covered off today, they are on-site, off-site, and in-store. On-site, off-site, and in-store. But stores still matter. Again, prep for this, I went around the world and searched all the numbers to show what is the percentage of e-commerce as a percentage of the total revenue base. Now actually, as it happens, Walmart are very, very high as a total percentage. But that's because they invested in Jet.com around 2014, 2015, and spent $3 billion to boot themselves forward. But the numbers typically are 10 to 15%. And in the case of, say, Boots Health and Beauty, any health and beauty brand like Ulta in the US typically has a higher percentage due to the nature of the product. But even in Australia, which is a very fast adopter of e-commerce, it's still only 10%. And that number is replicated across Home Depot in the US, Target in the US, Macy's, Kroger. It's always around 10 to 15%. So as a result, retailers are actually investing in in-store media. This is from the Retail Media Research Report by Merkle, carried out late last year. And you can see, marked in red, is the percentage that they're investing in in-store media of the total. Now, above that, you'll see social media and using these off-site channels are also a very high percentage as well. Now, part of this is that we talked about on-site, we talked about off-site, we talked about in-store. Eventually, no matter what the retailer is, they run out of inventory on-site. And they run out of propositions on-site. So they really actually have to go after off-site, and they really have to go after in-store. Let's get into it a little more. I'm going to put it to you this. This is the case I wish to put to you. In-store reaches shoppers in a high visibility, attention, and intent environment. And Dean could have said exactly the same thing to you 2,000 years ago as he was drinking his glass of wine, because the pictures are high visibility, high attention, and high intent. He wants his glass of wine, he likes the red one, and he knows what he wants to pay. However, the difference is now new inventory, new technology, which includes new ways of measurement, and new creative. And that's what we're really going to talk about today. Now, my friend Andrew Lipsman actually has a much more aggressive case on in-store. He believes in-store is going to emerge as the new TV, a mass reach vehicle ideal for brands that will deliver what they want, what TV has lost. Now, Andrew and I go back and forth on this a lot, but one of the things I did with him was to check out the numbers on the collapse in linear TV advertising for certain cohorts. And on the 18 to 25 cohort, the numbers are down 80% in 10 years. And Andrew believes that the top retailers in store are going to be comparable, or are comparable with the US broadcast networks. Now, this is the monthly unique reach. Now, I know you can go and say to me, Colin, it's not really like for like to go and say Walmart is like ABC or Fox. Yes, we know that. Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true, 100%. They're completely different contexts. What we're looking for is the absolute numbers to go and say, at a high level, reach is quite interesting through these stores. But I think, these are my views, that in-store is misunderstood for 7 reasons, some of which we've already touched on. People don't understand the inventory, or there's not a clear inventory available, size, type, or access. How can you buy across these? How can I get access to this media inventory? Very challenging. Lack of measurement. Well, Jeffrey and the IABs across the world are kind of solving that measurement problem, very early stages. Comparison. How do I compare what's on screen in a store with online? Because that is what brands want to hear. Creative. Well, we're going to talk about creative in a second. And e-commerce. Well, basically online has hogged all the news. And we're maybe sometimes unclear. But most of all, I would go and say status. Now, status is a big thing in marketing, because it's not sexy to talk about in-store versus a full 30-second ad that I can win an award in Cannes with. Yeah? Now, how do I know this? So I write a bit online about retail media. And I will go and say things like, well, in-store is very interesting. I think you can really build brands. Remember, I'm a career marketer. I really understand all the marketing effectiveness stuff. I've ran award-winning brands and spent $50 million a year on TV. So I kind of know my stuff. And I put that up. And I'll get the most comments. I mean, we're talking like 80 to 100 comments, most of which basically say, I'm an idiot. Yeah? You're a moron. This is the worst take I've ever seen. Yeah? In-store does not build brands. Only TV builds brands. So there's a mass delusion out there about that there's only one way that you can build a brand, that's on TV advertising. Because actually, online retail digital advertising, none of this stuff is seen as sexy. So it doesn't get the headlines in campaign, it doesn't get the headlines in marketing week. And so that's actually going to hold it back. Actually, this year in Cannes, I think it's going to be the biggest year ever for retail media, but there'll be no awards. So creating the case for in-store. One point that has not been mentioned, and I really want to bring it to light, is this issue of sustainability. The rest of what we're going to talk about today is around capability and creativity. But this sustainability point has not been brought up by anybody. Now, I want to say I love these sort of things. These cardboard, end of aisle, big features. I must have spent, I don't know, millions on this over the years in my career. I love these. But I also want to give you another story. So one of my clients is an Italian brand that's known across the world. So I'm in Milan this time a year ago, and they have Tesco and they have Amazon come in, broadcast in as part of the workshop. And you would think that Tesco were going to start talking about like numbers, volumes, deals, whatever. No, the first word out of both Tesco and Amazon is, the first thing we want to talk to you about is your sustainability story. Then they talked about products. Then they talked about volumes. Then they talked about numbers. And remember, this is in a closed group. Tesco and Amazon, two completely different companies who don't know each other, obviously, said sustainability. And my question to you is cardboard thrown out every 2 weeks across every retailer across the globe, is that really going to be seen as something that's sustainable and usable long term? I love them. I think they're incredible, but it's not exactly a sustainability story. Not at all. So what else can digital in-store do for us? This is an example from Lego, which is screen in-store, and it can help you build what's called a curated endless aisle. In other words, I can go through the product listing, work out what's happening, and I don't have to have all the stock in store. So I can get some engagement at the large screen. We can talk about the aforementioned end aisles. We can have promos built out, we can have trending, we can have specials. But of course, the eagle-eyed amongst you will work out, of course, that instead of the cardboard Cadbury's end of aisle that I have to stick and put up for 2 weeks, I can, using a CMS, live change the prices, the product, and the content as much as I want. And that's not something that's really talked about that much. It used to drive me bananas when I'd be buying outdoor advertising, 48-sheet posters, and I'd be stuck with something, or, God forbid, and I mean, I would never have done this, made a mistake in the copy. I mean, that would never have happened to me. But it's all gone out across the country, and there's nothing we can do, and we're locked in for 2 weeks. So that's actually another reason why digital is quite interesting. In general, it's because we can change the copy regularly. This is an example from CVS. Parv is somebody I know. He's the head of the retail media business there. 9,000 people, 9,000 stores. This is an example of them using screens in the store to tell and get people to test for diabetes in the US stores. And then within that content, they also then get them to go to what they call the back of the store to engage with the pharmacist part of the business if they need to go and get a test. I just touched on this idea of dynamism, where we can change the content of in-store depending on shopper missions, time of day. I just actually went to the local Tesco this morning, grab a quick snack before coming here. My shopper mission was breakfast, something I could have in my hand as I got here. Totally different mission to what I'm going to have today at 5 o'clock if I was going to buy my dinner in Tesco tonight. Weather, events, sun, timing, you can think how all of this is now much more flexible. I was in New York, as I say, in January, and one of the things at the NRF show was these idea of smart shelves. Now, and yes, it's moving. Yeah, great. These smart shelves really caught my eye because they're just at the edge of the shelves, they're completely digitally focused, and they can move and you can change the prices, change the content directly from a CMS. Now in my local store, as I walk in, it's like I can't read the price. I don't know which one it is. I need to get a pair of glasses, and I'm too vain to get a pair of glasses to read them, so I don't know the price of anything. And I can't see it. And that's before I go talk to my mother, who's in her 80s, who can't see anything. So these smart shelves are something I'm really excited about. I get overexcited about certain things that most people don't, but I think these are great. Digital shelves controlled by a CMS with a price. And then community message boards, using screens to build a local community rather than little pieces of paper up on the screen, and go from there. My final one that I saw in New York with these large-scale screens. And this is something I found really fascinating, and I can't tell you why, but there were large-scale screens, but these individuals was like movie star quality, like literally popped out. And I could observe myself staring at the screens going, wow, this is incredible. So imagine you've got an influencer doing makeup, talking, and you can scale that around every Boots or every Superdrug in the country. It was super powerful. Again, brand new CMSs doing brand new tech that was simply not available before. Right, let's shift gear to the final third of what I'm going to talk about, or the final bit of what I'm going to talk about, which is case studies from around the world, from my own clients around the world. So the Warehouse Group in New Zealand. So the Warehouse Group are the largest single retailer in New Zealand. They turn over 3 billion, 260 stores, 12,000 employees. And nearly every Kiwi goes to either a warehouse store, Noel Leeming, or warehouse stationery every week. Every Kiwi goes into these stores. So I talked to Alex, and he gave me a really long list of notes about it. And he gave me their rationale behind it. This is the entrance to a Noel Leeming store, which is kind of like a Curry's. And he said that their in-store environment is powerful and being underutilized. Bringing the screens in that brought these environments alive was a no-brainer. The decision to place the screens at the entry, but right within what he calls the racetrack, really worked very well. It was very popular with suppliers, allowing them to get their message close to the shelf and enabling us to communicate with customers as they shop, not just as they're entering the store. And they use the screens in two-zone manner, which is they sell half to the suppliers and half they use themselves, because this has then increased the increased budget available to their own brand labels as well, which has proven very powerful. And I think that's the thing he's happiest with. I was actually in Auckland when he was rolling these out, and he went around to about 5 stores with me, and they were super powerful. Now, this is the final point on the guys in New Zealand. He said, what would I have done differently? And his quote, I would have pushed to have done it sooner and at greater pace. Pushed to have sooner and at greater pace. And he said, what am I doing next? I'm going to move a portion of the space to put programmatic in play, primarily for agencies and primarily for non-endemic. And in fact, he's going to sell the whole lot pre-sold to an individual agency. I know Alex, he's definitely going to do it. He's a great guy. Let's move on to a company who you're probably not familiar with, but they're called Migros in Turkey. They're a client of mine in Turkey. They are huge. 2,600 stores, 160 million customers a year. The retail media division of Migros is called Mimeda. They do analytics, they do in-store, they do digital, they do content online, and they've been doing it for years, 5 years. Now, you may think you have a tough life, okay? But Kina and her team, who are just like a bunch of powerhouses, last year there's 70% inflation in Turkey, and there was an earthquake, all in the 1 year. So they have to grow their revenues by 100% year in year regardless, to stay static. And we work with them over about a year. But here's an example of some of the things they do. Digital screens are about 20% of what they do. But you can see, and I've actually been in these stores, when you walk around, these are incredibly compelling. Right over the fruit and veg section, kind of cinematic quality. Right over deli section there, again, pricing, labels. Again, fruit and veg, see different sections again. And then in the most important part in Turkey is the meat section, using it both to highlight the product, highlight the prices. And Kina and the team are also selling all of these at the shelves, at the paying counter, and also behind the individual individual sections within the store departments. Final case study is from Superdrug, my client in the UK. And this particular one is, they've got 800 stores, they're one of the largest health and beauty retailers in the country. This is a L'Oreal example. The campaign is called Sky High Air, and the idea was to introduce colour as part of the Sky High campaign. And they wanted to move their objective, as you can see, from functional to fun. It's a very Superdrug way of speaking. And the other part of Superdrug is they're very big on store takeover, stand expression, lots of product in your face to get excitement going for their particular target market. The actual amount using this campaign, the actual category, as well, this particular product grew by around 60% year on year, and the category grew around 24% within the Maybelline area. They knew the results from individual colors like mascara was 100% incremental and so on. So this sort of high impact, very big, in your face thing works beautifully for Superdrug. To wrap up what I'm going to say before we get Vanessa and Darren on stage, where do you want to start if you're going to develop your strategy? You've got two sets of considerations: what you're going to do, your vision for it in store, what are you going to do for your shoppers, what your objectives are, what is your proposition. And then you have to start thinking about your content and your programming. They're actually two separate decisions. One of the things that happens is, and I've made this error before, is I went straight to content, I went straight to technology. And I didn't go straight to, okay, what are we really trying to do? Where does this fit within our overall business? And so on. Right, on that bombshell, I want to invite up Vanessa and Darren to come on stage. Now, we're going to have a very casual panel session. We're also going to have some great visuals in a minute as well. But I want to start with Vanessa, because, well, actually, no, I don't. I want to get them to introduce themselves first, and then I'm going to start with Vanessa. So do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Great session already today. My name is Vanessa. I work for a research agency called Walnut. If you haven't heard of us, we are a human understanding agency where we put the likes of behavioural science and neuroscience really at the core of what we do in terms of our shopper and consumer projects.
Great. Darren?
Darren Groucutt. I'm the Creative Director of Retail Experience at VCCP. Currently work across Cadbury's, O2 and White Claw. Previously worked across Adidas and McDonald's and Mercedes-Benz other agencies over the last 10 years.
And we're going to see some examples of that work in a few minutes. So we're going to have the insights part and then the creative part. Now, given what you've just seen and heard this morning, Vanessa, what's your kind of insights around what the shopper is thinking behaviourally as they go into store? What does the data say?
Well, I think kind of stepping back a bit, it's just been really interesting, you know, hearing different people's perspectives about retail media. And, you know, certainly from the work we do, which is a lot of it is grocery focused, you know, it's really about the triple win. It's, you know, it has to work hard for the retailer, it has to work hard for the supplier or the brand, but also, and maybe, you know, I'm a bit biased, I'll say it has to work really hard for shoppers too. And ultimately, we want to understand what is working well for shoppers, because that's going to drive more engagement, drive more impact. So it's really understanding what shoppers need and want from what they call a lot of the time advertising. They're very aware, you know, retail media is advertising, it's signage when they go around in store.
What are they looking for, though? What does the search say?
So in terms of what they are looking for from retail media, a lot of it is around navigation, ultimately. So help me find the products I want as quickly as possible. You were talking quite a bit about mission, which is really interesting because we have to kind of give the context. People are going in store, they're busy, they don't have time. I think Dean mentioned it. They're not going to stand at the end of an aisle and look at a film. You know, they don't have time. So it's really about get me the products as quickly as possible. So retail media has that role to play. But it's also things like, and you had some good examples around education. So tell me more about the brand or the product so I can make a choice. Inspiration as well. So actually highlighting new products, telling me about new variants of products is really important as well. So I think putting shopper at the heart is really important because it's about driving and changing their behaviour. So retail media needs to show up in that regard to actually support them with their needs and wants when they're shopping.
Cool. So needs and wants, Darren. How do we think about that in the context of content and creative? Like, what goes inside a mind like yourself when you hear those words?
Well, we obviously when we get, primarily in advertising, you have your advertising, whether that's social, above the line, 68 sheets, like you said, and it's how we actually take that story into retail. Are we promoting this via quality? Are we promoting this via value? And then being able to take that, give the consumer the extra nudge into whether it's extra detail or extra messaging around value. So retail media, it lets us tell more of that story, and obviously we've got, people said this morning, we've got a greater dwell time, so we can actually go more into if there's a brand story around a product or, this product's going to change your life, then we can actually increase that storytelling in store.
But in terms of one of the key tools within the world of marketing is a brief. And how would the brief change, say, for in-store versus, say, if I'm doing radio, print, TV? How does the brief change?
The briefing is quite interesting because we, retail media, apart from Greece in the whenever, retail media is quite new, and I've noticed the change from being, film and animation going into agency life, where the digital side of a brief was always the last sort of thing to be briefed in, right? And then now it's become, obviously social and everything else has risen, and now the retail media or retail part of the brief is always it's always the last thing in the rung, whereas we're very much, we try and everyone is on the same journey straight away, so we can see the pull-off points through the briefing at the start, right the way through the journey, so we know the retail messaging is not going to be a massive leap, but also the retail messaging can change a bit, whereas we're making people aware on the outside of store. When we come in store, we can actually be more direct and change that same premise, change the messaging to actually for purchase.
Now we're going to look at some creative in a second, but Vanessa, just talking about when, say, the brand marketers are here in the room, give us some insights as to you, like you said, start with the shopper. And Darren's just talked about actually different between inside and outside. Maybe give us a flavour of what's going on in more depth in the customer's mind and how we should write our briefs.
Well, I think when looking at retail media, and we have been doing quite a lot of research in store and online to really understand what is cutting through and why it's cutting through more with shoppers. And we put a lot of behavioural science at the core, kind of what we do. Some of those behavioural science kind of frameworks. So things like, as human beings, we take the path of least resistance, so make it as easy as possible for me. Choice overload, which is a big thing in grocery, can actually really overwhelm shoppers. So there's some really interesting principles to kind of adopt when thinking about designing retail media. Whether that's things like colour, semiotics. We've had lots of debate recently about, is yellow the new red when it comes to promotional campaigns, etc. Yellow is a colour that's more visible to shoppers or to the human eye. It's more positive, whereas red, not so much. But shoppers have become trained to kind of notice red over the years. Things like movement, and when we talk about digital media as well, we definitely see that as the way forward. Movement catches our attention as humans, our attention as shoppers, but it has to be designed appropriately. Like Dean said, shoppers aren't there to spend ages in store looking at video, but actually is it loops, short loops that actually will capture people's attention. Things like location, so important, no matter how well designed your campaign or display is. If it's not in the right location, in those hotspots around the store environment or even online, as shoppers may be shopping online, it's just not going to get cut through. So I think there's some, there's some really interesting fundamentals that we need to put at the fore when kind of designing retail media.
And that was very much one of the use cases with Mameda, where they were talking particularly around fruit and veg. It's the same with Woolworths in Australia, where the big screens and the company positions itself around fruit and veg and uses the big screen to reinforce that positioning as well. So it's a signpost and a positioning exercise all in one. Now, speaking of signposting and positioning, maybe we can transition to having a look at some creative and action. With a bit of luck, should I press the button here, and hopefully we'll have some magic? Will that magic happen? Here we go. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this, Darren?
Yeah, so
this is your handiwork in action.
Yeah, so this is the launch of some of you may have heard of Adidas Predator. It's a famous football boot, but in 2019, Adidas redesigned the material that would give the player extra swerve on the ball. Granted, this is in a flagship on 425 Oxford Street, but we just wanted to show you some of the amount of screens and different type of screens that we had in store. So the brief for this was to actually, can we see, hear and touch Predator? They're trying to tell the consumer about Demon Skin, which is the new material on the boot, and how people could engage with that. So not only in this, in the launch zone in 425, some of you may have been there, there's a full takeover. It's probably about 30 screens altogether where we could actually tell more of the story around the boot, and then get people to touch, feel, see it, hear it, and then go and test it. So not only are you getting the benefits, there's actually a proof point where you can go upstairs into the cages and actually take a ball and swerve it into some other screens that are actually like targets that we could measure. You could measure things on them.
Did you get to bend it?
Yes,
like
I bent.
Beckham,
Yes. Funny enough, just the week before this came out as well, Beckham did a social post where he was like he wished these were out in his when he was playing. So that was
back in the day.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I find with, say, Adidas, and when I'm doing workshops in these areas, I talk in terms of products that are very high passion index. That's a high passion index product. It's something people are interested in. It's intriguing. You want to kind of engage with it, which is slightly different to me going to the local shop to buy the marmalade and the tins of beans and so on. And so how would you think about that when it comes to bringing that to life? Obviously, my jar of marmalade is not as exciting as bending it like Beckham, but give us a context of how to think about that, to bring some of these to life.
Yeah, again, it comes down to obviously the brief. So if we, obviously at VCCP we work a lot on Cadbury's, so there's a myriad of chocolate cues that you can go through. So we would look at whether it is a new flavour, like a new flavour, or a new, obviously Easter has just been out. So we will look at all those points, fruit and nuttier, which has got fruitier and nuttier. So we'll actually just ramp up those flavour cues, which you couldn't normally do, obviously on normal print media within store. We can actually ramp that up, and we can show how bars are being made and how things are being treated. So really, really just being able to, again, tell that story more for that brand.
And you go ahead.
I was just going to say, to kind of add to that, it's really kind of interesting to think about, digital media and going further with things like the power of emotion. So tapping into, and maybe with chocolate, that's, a very emotive category. You can kind of tap into, a lot of consumers' kind of emotions. And actually, that's a really important point within any retail media, is to kind of tap into emotion. And actually, beyond just brand blocking, which maybe Cadbury's has, the color cue within the category to create a brand block, but actually what can digital media do to tap into more emotion, occasion, bring it to life for shoppers to actually drive more engagement?
Well, exactly, and that's where obviously a few people have mentioned you yourself mentioned day parting. So there's a few brands that we're working on now is where we're very much the skewed creative. Like, let's say if you are doing a Euros campaign with someone, and they're going, it's all about the kick-off of the tournament, but then something does happen with like the weather, it's being able to go actually change the messaging that's like, this is a celebration moment, and then this is more of a comfort moment. So for in the morning it's torrential rain and England have lost, you can sort of change that messaging around comfort and being like, arms around you, don't worry, it'll all be better soon. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the thing that's intrigued me most over the last few years, just seeing the power of the CMSs. Now, from your perspective, though, with VCCP hat on, does that mean that you have to plan for all eventualities in terms of content and creative, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, what we do, we'll look at the moments. So we'll look at moments like a life cycle of, say, a consumer, of what could happen over the next 6 weeks, and then we will have those parts, they're sort of ready. So you could do run this, and run this. So there'll be like 4 or 5 different sort of variants. Myself and my Steph, who I work with, we both worked at McDonald's, like 8 years between us, and they're the obviously they developed day parting, especially in America. It's new over here, but day parting there, where we talk about breakfast in the morning, and then so you can actually, we learnt that there, that like messaging is key to sort of around the weekly shopper habit or mission.
Well, actually, one of the things mentioned earlier, and I touched on it in mine in terms of marketing effectiveness, day parting or category entry points. I mean, that is all part of the way of just accessing the customer's brain to go and say, it's breakfast, this product now suits you at that time. Though I must say, just speaking of the Cadbury's, compared to, I mean, I must say I love the cardboard layout that we have there, but bringing the glass and a half to life in a screen, that must be great fun to do.
Yeah.
I love that. So back to the shopper. Within your research, we talk about shoppers generically, but actually, is there more kind of segment? We know there's different segments within the shopper categories. Do they react and think about in-store? I'm just being kind of selfish here, because when I go into my local supermarket, choice overload is the big problem. And unless I arrive in with a list, it's like I walk in going, I feel like, you know, Father Dougal and Father Ted come and just walk around going, okay, great, I guess. And I come home and I say to my wife, I got stuff, well, I don't think we can actually use any of it. It's just too much choice. So what are the different categories within like the shoppers, and what are they thinking when they go in the store?
Yeah, so I guess maybe, Colin, in some ways you're not a very planned shopper, but actually you're a prime target, so maybe you've been influenced by
Sucker,
media.
sucker is the word, okay.
But I think, yeah, it's really important to think about all of that stuff, the kind of pre-shop influence and all that kind of baggage that comes with, you know, shoppers going in store and probably doing a trolley shop, or even just doing a top-up shop, getting what they need. You know, how planned is their shopping? And actually we see around 30% of shoppers who are actually really planned when they're going in store. So retail media has to work super hard to disrupt them in a positive way. But interestingly, and on the flip side, there's around 70% of shoppers who are actually open to influence. You know, those that maybe have semi-planned, they kind of have an idea about the category but haven't decided on the brand, and therefore branded retail media definitely has a role to play. And then around a fifth who actually are really impulsive, so maybe a bit more like you, that's going around in store and actually being influenced quite a lot as they shop. So there's definitely that piece. There's the mission piece and that choice overload. We know that people who are doing, you know, big shops, whether that's online or in store, you know, can be very focused. They have a lot to kind of get through in terms of their list. And then there's demographics piece as well. We definitely see some, you know, interesting demographics, and actually, you know, older demographics, not as engaged with retail media as per se maybe younger shoppers. So there's definitely that piece around kind of segmentation, and it allows therefore for better targeting of retail media.
Cool. Now, before we get to questions, we may have room for a question or so, but it's just some sort of wrap-up points for the audience. 3 or 4 things, or 2 or 3 things to say. When you're thinking of creative in retail media, I want you to think of this. Give us some thoughts there, Darren.
Well, the big thing that we do is actually set out the kit of like the parts of the parts of campaign that we know are going to resonate in store. So it's having that key messaging, logos, branding. It sounds quite obvious, but like you'll be amazed how people miss some key cues that can then be taken in store for that conversion. So it's just really having having that, these are the assets we're going to use, and everyone's on the same page, so we can actually continue that conversation in store.
And don't leave it as an afterthought.
Exactly, and that's ongoing from when the brief first comes in for the TV ad or what have you.
Yeah, it's like social media back in the day. Let's take the TV ad and reduce it to 1 centimetre by 1 centimetre.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Vanessa?
I would probably say, and I know I've touched on it, I think from all the research we've done, with eye tracking or else VR environments, I think location is so important. So, you've done your great creative, etc. It's about, getting visibility of that display or creative. So I think location is so important. Understanding the hot spots for your category, which can be quite different across the store. Emotion, I think that's really, really interesting as well with some of the retail media that we see in store. Actually, just straightforward branded messaging, not cutting through as much as maybe you mentioned something about pouring the milk. We see, creative or retail media that has imagery, people, occasions, enjoying your product, etc., getting a lot more cut through. And I think maybe building on your point, Darren, about simplicity, about messaging, that's quite key as well. Like, not throwing the kitchen sink, because you've got your hierarchy of maybe messaging that you want to cut through, and that's really important. So keeping it simple as well, because remember, shoppers are busy.
Perfect. Excellent. Do we have time for a question?
We do have time for a question. I can kick us off. I was wondering if the panel could discuss the possible tensions or opportunities about the retailer brand versus the product brand as it plays in store. Colin, you presented some great retailer brands. Darren, the Adidas was in its flagship, so very much held within the product brand. Is there considerations to be made about that?
This comes up with all the retailers I work with. This comes up all the time, and there's an initial, what should we do about it? And then eventually, once you work out within both the context, the day parting and the creative that you've got, that actually both the shoppers like it, the brands don't mind it, the fact that you're cutting with your own in-store labels, and builds out choice and builds out kind of buy-in internally as well. So the ones I know of quite well, it can be up to 60% pure in-store messages, which could be made up of their own brands, but also things like weather or local announcements for that as well. So it's not like every single slot on every single screen is sold to every single brand for the highest possible yield. It's not like that at all. These screens, regardless of the size, are used for a whole variety of things, one of which is advertising. And the final point, the guys in New Zealand are using it for non-endemics as well, and he's getting a lot of traction on that. Jonathan?
Well, we started to touch on something I wanted to ask more about, which was non-endemic and its role in the store. I think it's something that people talk about, and are you seeing any examples around the world of sort of successful non-endemic advertising existing within the store? And by non-endemic, I just mean products or services or brands that are not sold.
I'll be upfront and say no, I have not.
You have not?
No, and the reason is quite straightforward. The retailers themselves are protective of the brand experience. I mean, they're taking what Vanessa says on board, and there's this little bit of a juxtaposition. I think on that, and by the way, I should tell you, I come from an airline and travel background, and so I know this whole idea of ancillaries and upsell, cross-sell, and this idea of where the venues that you can sell seats with. And I think you have to be careful with non-endemic, partly because the shopper, as they're doing in, say, a grocery store, is got a mission. And if there's a non-endemic thing there, it kind of jars. Now, maybe within that community notice piece that I put there earlier on, where there's other things going on, you can go non-endemic. But typically the non-endemic that I've seen is they're using the audiences, but it's external to the store, or there's a partnership that is, say, a financial services partnership, like, say, a MasterCard or a Visa thing. I think the audiences part are what's going to work on non-endemic, only certain places within the store. That's what I've seen. Any thoughts there, folks?
I haven't seen any, but obviously you just touched on it there. But the way in, if someone came to me with that brief, I'd be definitely looking at partnerships of how you can join whoever should be in the store to the end, the partner coming in, and how they're sort of perceived. That's how I'd be looking at it, but I haven't seen any evidence.
Was that it? Big thanks to Vanessa and
there's one more.
to Darren. Thank you for... Oh, there's one more. Okay. Excellent.
I just wanted to ask a little bit more around the sort of, the creative, and I love what you're saying about making content more relevant for the store, but as part of an integrated kind of consumer journey. To what extent do you need to tailor further within a different touch points, building on what Vanessa was saying, within the store? So would you have the same creative at a digital 6-sheet or a screen in the entrance to a store versus when it's at shelf, where maybe you need to be a bit more sort of where product is, I guess, where product isn't? Would you advocate tailoring the content further to that next level?
Yeah, so is that for me? Yes. We're currently working with the National Lottery as an example, and that is very much what's going on outside changes as you go through as you're outside the store, whether it's proximity, coming through the car park, and once you go in store, we'll shift the messaging to wherever if you're to play, and then right down to the till point. So the messaging just slightly changes. As I said, same premise, but the messaging would, there's a driver. When by the time they get to the till, they'll be like, oh my God, why aren't I buying this? Do you know what I mean? And then also, it's also thinking about disruptors. So if someone's gone past a certain point, and then there's hopefully there's another place in the store where there's a placement, whether it's a shelf end or a fin, they can recall it back out. Just they've seen it on the way in, they've seen something, it recalls their recalls their brain to go, hang on a minute, of course. So yes, definitely change from awareness to purchase through an engaged cycle.
Super. Thank you very much, Darren and Vanessa.